Hi guys, it's Andy McDonald and welcome to the Informed Performance Podcast. On today's episode, I have the one and only Mike Reinold. Mike, as many of you will know, is a PT, strength conditioning coach and performance specialist that works in and around professional baseball and has done for a number of years. I'm very grateful to be able to get him on the podcast at the moment because it's currently the middle of spring training, which is, of course, a very crazy time of year for the professional baseball world. He's the owner of a private facility, Champion PT, in Boston, and he's a huge source of knowledge through his courses or website content, constantly giving back to the education of both physios and strength coaches alike. In this conversation, it was just so tempting to go into sports medicine nuances and specifics, but Mike has so much in-depth information available on his website for tons of specific topics that you can go and indulge in. So I wanted to probe more into his broader perspectives, his professional predictions, and his insights for how he operates as a performance specialist. He's incredibly experienced and he provides us with some really pragmatic take-homes, whether you're a physio or a strength coach in this episode. So I hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, here is the conversation between myself and Mike Reinold. Hi Mike. You are, of course, very well known, but thanks for coming on the podcast. And just for the listeners that might be first discovering you now, could you just give some kind of context as to who you are and what you've done?
Yeah. Well, first, obviously, thank you for having me, and congrats on the podcast that you and Ben are putting together and getting all these great episodes. If the people listening don't realize it, some of them probably don't. There's a lot of hard work that goes into these. So thanks for creating this resource, and obviously humbled to be on. But I guess to answer your question, I'm Mike. I'm a physical therapist, athletic trainer, strength coach. Kind of had like a performance specialty kind of niche, that I've kind of built over the last 20 years or so. I do most of that stuff at my facility up in Boston, Massachusetts. It's called Champion PT and Performance. And I have a website, just my name, MikeReinold.com, that I essentially just share stuff, and kind of like this podcast, I just share some things I'm thinking and I'm learning, and kind of just try to bring people along for the ride of my education, and let other people kind of learn from me from what I'm learning. I don't know if that was a good way, but it's tons of stuff on there, podcasts. I got a bunch of online courses, so that's kind of like my hub. So that I'm all over social media, that sort of stuff. So I'm easy to find.
Yeah, and of course, lots of people aspire to be in pro sport, and many progress or aim to have their own facility as well. In kind of transitioning from being a person who's worked in and around pro sport quite extensively to becoming a facility owner and business owner clinically, is there any kind of key things that you think you've been able to carry forward that have attributed to your success having a facility and building kind of like a personal brand in the industry?
Yeah, I guess I've been fortunate. I've gotten to work in a lot of pretty neat environments, I guess, in different areas within our professions, which is pretty cool. Like many people, I started off in kind of like the factory setting, right, where you're seeing a ton of people in a physical therapy clinic, and insurance-based model where you're just churning out patients. And a lot of people like to talk badly about that environment. And sure, I don't think it's the best environment for quality of care, but man, for a new clinician early in my career, I sure did learn a lot by having such high volume of people that I worked with. So, I kind of started off with that, but then I got a pretty unique kind of opportunity to work in pro sports, and specifically professional baseball. So I started working with the Boston Red Sox, which was pretty cool, I guess, because I guess that was pretty much my dream job, right? That's kind of like why I did everything I did, was to get that exact job. So I got super lucky, right? And actually got the exact job that I was shooting to get. So got super lucky. But when I was in the pro sports model, what became really clear to me were several unique things that make the quality of care just amazing. And probably the biggest one was just a collaboration between a bunch of different professionals. So I always kind of say like a multidisciplinary approach, right? Where you have physical therapists, you have athletic trainers, you have strength and conditioning coaches, and those are the main group that are with players every day. But you have tons of extra help from massage therapists to chiropractors to the physicians to, heck, nowadays even biomechanists and data analysts that are looking at our sports science type of information. Again, it was just this amazing environment where we were all working together to help the person enhance their performance, right? So not just come back from an injury, but how do we get the most out of your body, right? How do we optimize you? How do we enhance you? So, kind of when I went from pro sports and I kind of said like, all right, well, I want to build my own place now. I want to do the kind of the same model that we did with pro sports, but I want to do it for the general public. I want to do it for the high school kids. I want to do it for the college kids, even adults that just want to get the most out of their bodies. So when we built our practice, essentially what we did is we built a gym and we built a physical therapy clinic, and we hired a bunch of people that were, again, a combination of PTs and strength coaches that could work together to collaborate. And I think that was like my biggest take home from being able to work in pro sports was I want to do that same model for everybody else. And that's kind of how, we started the blueprints behind Champion when we were kind of trying to figure out how we wanted to go.
And I guess when you've got, or when you're able to bring in different specialists as individuals, I guess you're also then able to upskill everybody as better generalists, because the PT learns from the strength coach and vice versa, and you get a much more skilled workforce, I guess, at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the flaws I see occur in probably most professions, but certainly in our professions here, is that, I'm primarily a physical therapist, so it's easy to speak for that. But a lot of PTs want to pretend that they're like amazing strength coaches. And look, I get it. Like, you took the CSCS, you passed that test one weekend. Congrats, right? But that doesn't mean you know how to train people, right? You don't know how to coach people or train people or get the most out of them just because you got some initials after your name. You have to actually work in that setting to really appreciate it. So, I see a lot of PTs trying to, pretend they're strength coaches. I see them, heck, using the baseball example, but you can apply this to anything. Like, I see them trying to pretend they're pitching coaches, right? Or they're skill coaches that work with the players. And I've resisted the urge to do that, even though I could probably do a really good job at that, and just said, look, I want to focus on this small thing that I'm an expert at, and then I want to bring in other experts that are really good at their small things too, right? And if you have a bunch of people working together like that, I think you're always going to get the best experience. So it's surprising to me that a lot of people kind of try to take on the world themselves, but I guess, like, if you're in the middle of like nowhere in the middle of the country somewhere and you don't have like a huge network of people, that's fine. But if you do, I really, really encourage people to broaden their network and try to find some local experts that they can collaborate with if they don't have it all in one setting like we kind of built.
Yeah, no, of course. Across the ranks of professional sport, there's some brilliant people across the different teams and leagues, and our knowledge and our understanding of performance in sports medicine improves year on year, and equally our resources, our technology, and our understanding of the data, etc., also becomes more sophisticated, but we don't always have more time when we're in those environments. I saw that you recently tweeted that you spent 2 weeks at spring training not just evaluating, treating and training, but also educating and empowering athletes to optimize themselves. I'm really interested. Could you kind of provide some context behind that and where that came from?
Yeah, that was a pretty vague tweet, right? But I guess most tweets are vague, right? That's the whole point of Twitter, I guess. But yeah, pretty vague, but it was, intentionally vague, so you could kind of take what you want out of it. I'm sure there was a lot of people that read that tweet and thought I was like lecturing, right? And I had slides and stuff like that. There's probably other people that just, kind of got probably my built-in message there was that, yes, I was performing those things, but I was educating during the process. And I think that was kind of my main point. I think a lot of people got that, but people definitely thought I was like didactically, educating people like with presentations and stuff. But no, the way I approach working with my athletes is I don't take for granted that they know everything we know, the science, the data that we're seeing every day from the metrics that we get, just like observing them and acquiring just different tests from them over time. I don't assume that they know all that stuff. So I've always kind of put it on myself that I want to educate the player exactly everything I can about the sport so that way they can optimize themselves. So using baseball, obviously, as the example here, with the pitchers, oftentimes, players' arms hurts, right? Their shoulders, their elbows get hurt. It's pretty common in baseball, obviously. And they have all these weird assumptions as to why that may be happening. And, I always kind of start with it and kind of explain one simple fact. Kind of step one in the education process is throwing a baseball is bad for you. Right. And that's kind of like where we tend to start. And then you start kind of like talking about the science about it. And then you have to explain to them about workload management. And hey, I'm looking at some of your data, some of the torque on your elbow over the last week with your long toss program. I just wanted you to see it so that way, you can understand what you're doing when you're playing catch, for example. So for me, I've always really tried to empower the person. I want to teach them everything I know about the sport and the science of that sport so that way they can understand it. And that way they can then make the decisions down the road on what's best for them. To me, I think that's the more important thing to do is, a lot of people in our fields in pro sports, they like to just bark at the athletes and say what to do. I like to try to teach them why we're doing it. And then when we get to the what, it's like butter in my hands, right? They're all on board with anything I'm going to say because I explain the why first. So we always start with why. And I think that's kind of my main point of that tweet was give them the why, the science behind these things. Maybe why you should do this on a certain day, or maybe why you feel this, the day after you pitch, for example, and kind of build from there. I think that's really what I meant by educating the players.
Yeah. Yeah, I did wonder with the kind of empowering part whether there was any kind of reference to whether in a professional team setting perhaps we do too much for the athletes occasionally. That could sound controversial, but are we doing too much for them that perhaps some of it they could do themselves and over catering for them?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a catering thing, right? But it's, kind of, get back to like the beginning of your question a little bit when you kind of said there's just like a ton of data now, right? And what do we do with all this data? I guess is the question. It's showing them kind of the results of what they're doing. There's maybe it's because just baseball's so old, right? It's a traditional kind of sport. It's been around for over 100 years, right? Like people have these weird traditions that they do, these superstitions that really don't make sense scientifically, that we're trying to kind of debunk a little bit, right? And it's kind of trying to state why, because for them it's comfort, right? It's, well, this is how I've done it, and look, I'm pretty close to making the big leagues. Like I'm a elite athlete right here, so I'm comfortable doing this. Where we then have to say yes, that's great, but I'd like you to be comfortable doing this for 10 more years, right? So that's kind of how we apply it.
Yeah, I guess you create a more informed athlete, you have better conversations, and I guess their reasons when they come to you are more educated and refined as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's, to me, again, it always just goes back to starting with why, and that's probably one of the best books you could probably read if you're just getting into the business here. But it's everybody just focuses on the what. But if you always explain your why, then you're going to get much better just buy-in and compliance and just overall probably better results because they understand kind of where you're coming from and some of the rationale behind your thoughts.
Something I'm always kind of curious about is obviously, what we do now is almost more complicated than it used to be because we have more things that we can include in our information collection on an athlete or how we inform our process. How have you kind of over time managed the ability to almost stay on time and get things done with the increased complexity and the tools that we can add into things?
Yeah, it's hard because like we kind of said this before. I mean, there's so much data out there. We could get so much. I think what we found in the professional sports model, at least, is that we know we can collect a lot of data. That's step number one. right? There's tons of different data too. There's kind of like external data, or extrinsic data where it's like, for example, like maybe your performance outcomes, like your batting average or your earned run average, or even some advanced like sabermetric type things in baseball, where we have our different analysis. But you have that sort of data. We have kind of like our intrinsic data too, which is like maybe your pitch velocity, maybe your horizontal vertical movement, your spin rate on your fastball, how that varies between different pitches, right? But then we have all of our physical data too, right? Like, all right, what's their hip range of motion? What's their shoulder strength? All these different things. So the first step is saying, like, what data do we want? And pretty much what you're going to almost always do is just collect a ton of data and then have no idea what to do with it, right? Because you almost have too much data. The key for me has always been this: you need more manpower. You need more people to help you analyze the data, right? Especially in the pro sports model. So think of this like as the evolution now. So like, I kind of reference that I was working with the Boston Red Sox for a while, and that was a great experience. And, I'm super fortunate now. I'm helping the Chicago White Sox now. So different color Sox, but I'm helping them now kind of rebuild their medical department and kind of get more modern with some of this approach. And, the first thing we said was, all right, let's start collecting the data. Right. And then the second thing we said was, great, we have all this data, but your physical therapist on the team is literally rehabbing people all day. Your athletic trainers are literally in the training room helping guys get ready every day. Your strength coaches are in the gym all day helping the players get their training. They don't have time to look at this data, right? Because they're working with the people. So, the first thing you do is, all right, we need to start building our sports science department. And then that's kind of where you have analysts that come in. So for me, how do you handle all the data? I think, well, it's kind of simple. You have somebody that is their sole responsibility is data management and analysis. But then the clinical team, the people that actually work with the players every day, they get to ask questions now. Say, hey, what is does grip strength correlate to exit velocity for our batters? And then over time, does that cause more oblique injuries or whatever it may be, right? There's all these like detailed analyses we can do based on that. But for me, how do you handle it is you build a bigger team. Now, if you can't do that, which is probably most people that are in the pro sports model, I think it's very, very, very easy. You just start simple. You start with the low-hanging fruit, the big rocks, and you don't try to overcomplicate things, right? Everybody wants to say, hey, I have an opportunity to go do screening on a local high school baseball team. There's 50 kids that I'm going to go screen, and they want to do this like huge complex screening thing, right? But if you really think about it, you could probably just pick 4, 5, 6 things that are going to probably have the biggest impact on their injury risk and their performance, inhibitors, like that type of thing, right? So stick with those 6 things, just master that. Get those basics down. And then if you have more time or if you have more manpower down the road, you can get a little bit more sophisticated with your data. But man, for baseball, like just check their arm range of motion and strength, right? Like if you're worried about all these fancy, do they have, big toe extension, right? But you're not looking at external rotation strength of the shoulder. You're kind of, taking it a little bit too far, right? Just stick to the basics that are going to be, the bread and butter, and that's probably the best way to do it. Start simple.
Do you think, I guess with what we spoke about a second ago with athlete education and empowerment in mind, have you ever kind of used your education to teach the athlete how to collect their own information that's relevant in terms of how they then manage their decisions, whether that's screening their own mobility before they train or something like that? Do you ever kind of equip them with the data approach or the information collecting approach for their own management?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably the next, kind of wave of evolution, probably with our sports science and all these things, especially at the pro sports model. And just to give you just like a quick, like little, story of how it's gone, and something as big as Major League Baseball. So pro sports, Major League Baseball is a business, right? There is a huge ownership conglomerate. This is billions of dollars, right? the players have a huge union. There's this players association. It's the world's probably most powerful union out there. So we, in baseball over the last 5-10 years or so, some of the teams got out ahead and they started doing these advanced like sports science things, all based on, some of the great things we've learned from overseas, like with, soccer teams and rugby and stuff like that. And they were looking at, let's look at hydration levels. Let's look at their sleep metrics. Let's look at all these things that we can find. And then you know what happened one day? The union came in and said, hey guys, to the players, hey guys, stop doing all that. You're giving them data that they're going to use against you. Right? How crazy is that? Right? It's a little disappointing, but they're probably right. So, and that's kind of the problem with that is when the team, the owner, who is the boss, is collecting the data. Sometimes the players feel like they're going to use that negatively against them and maybe like a salary kind of negotiation or contract negotiation in the future. So I think the future is having the players understand this and be able to manage this themselves, right? Like being able to just do their own HRV and maybe like waking heart rate in the morning and kind of see how their rest has been, to maybe record their own things like hydration and sleep hours and their RPEs with just how they're doing things. Embracing all these things and teaching them a little bit of this, I think, is going to be the next wave. For the skill work, the players are already doing it, at least in baseball. Every pitcher knows his velocity. Every pitcher is working on their spin rate. All the batters are working on their exit velocity, right? So they have sensors that you can put on the bat. They have fairly affordable kind of machines that measure things like your spin rate and movement that baseball players can use. They're already doing that for a data approach for their performance outcomes. The next wave now is kind of teaching them how to do it for themselves for their physical outcomes.
Mm. Is that something that you kind of implement at Champion BT with pros, or perhaps, I guess maybe athletes that don't have the pro team around them, like say a high school athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. And the high school athletes are tough, right? Because I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't remember high school, but I feel like the high schoolers nowadays are in a much, much tougher situation than we probably were when we were kids. I feel like they have activities all afternoon and night. They're doing homework at 10 o'clock at night still. Like they're not sleeping. They're not recovering. Some are playing 3 sports. Some are just playing 1 sport. They both have pros and cons. Like there's so many things that go into that. So, I always just take the approach, especially with the high school youth kids, is, we're here to help you and your family, like your parents, kind of help you through this process. So, what can you do to maybe eat better, or what can you do to recover better from that workout? But there's only so much you can do when you only have them for maybe 2-3 hours a week at your facility, right? So, it's super hard in that. Like it's mostly the basics of sleep, hydration, nutrition, like those sorts of things. And then as the player gets a little bit older and then they start getting to the college level, they start getting to even the pro level or, the minor leagues, before they get to the major leagues, then they can start to focus a little bit more on their sport as their profession. And that's when you can really start taking advantage of that.
In terms of kind of, if that's kind of trends that we might see for the delivery or the management of athletes, I'm really aware that you've clearly got your ear to the ground on educating professionals with your kind of online empire of courses, and your performance specialist program. Is there kind of any gaps in knowledge that you see clinicians going into sport now having that maybe need upskilling in certain areas, or is there any kind of things that or trends you're seeing with clinicians that we need as a collective to be able to deliver going forwards?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, believe it or not, that's kind of where my latest course, my Champion Performance Specialist course, kind of came from. I didn't like set out to make this course, right? It wasn't, I have a course on how to like evaluate and treat the shoulder, and another one on the knee. That was very specific, right? It's like, all right, I'm a specialist in shoulder rehab. Let me teach you how to do that, right? With the Champion Performance Specialist thing, essentially what happened was I evolved as a professional and I kind of got better at these things. I started hearing from more and more students, and even the clinical rotations that come through our facility, that they all feel like they're learning the basics of like evaluation, treatment, even training, but they don't know how to work with people that want to enhance their performance. right? And then we kind of started this buzz. We kind of call it performance therapy, just like performance training. But it's kind of set to think, look, you don't need to have like a huge injury or a surgery to go to get performance therapy. You might just be suboptimal, and there may be things we can do to kind of restore, optimize, and then eventually enhance your performance. And we started kind of, focusing on this more by kind of putting all of the things we do together in one bucket. And it became very apparent that other people were struggling with this concept, that you don't learn this in school, right? You don't learn how to optimize and enhance your performance. You just kind of learn the basics, almost like how to not hurt the person, right? That's what you learn in school. So it became very obvious to us that people didn't know how to do that sort of thing. So as we systemized our approach at Champion, just when we were building our practice, all the students, all the people come through, they were just like, man, you gotta teach this. And that's kind of how our Champion Performance Specialist was kind of born. It was more of something that we just inherently did. And I guess in my 20 plus years now of these weird, unique situations I've found myself in, you learn a ton just accidentally through just osmosis, almost just in those environments. So I truly, this is completely humble. I mean, I'm completely humble about this, but I truly feel like this program is like a shortcut to somebody to jump like 10 plus years in their career with like figuring out how to evaluate somebody's movement and then how to restore and optimize them, because that's just not what you get in school these days.
Yeah. Do you think, because I kind of think that strength and conditioning coaches, as a wide sweeping generalization, are far more comfortable with the idea that you can fine tune performance and you can microdose things to get a longer term progression in something technically or athletically. Do you think maybe PTs, the education kind of almost blocks that way of thinking? Because it's kind of like, you do something, test, retest, has it worked? Okay, maybe there is or there isn't evidence. There's not that kind of patience, time-wise, to see something evolve.
Yeah, especially if you're in the insurance-based model and you have like visitation limits and stuff like that. We just got to get to a point where physical therapy is especially in the insurance-based model, and you have 6 visits. Like you got to realize, like, what on earth are you going to get done in 6 visits? That's like useless. So great, you are. Let's just say you're a middle-aged guy. You're completely out of shape. You had your poor mobility, poor stability in certain areas, and you decided to play basketball one weekend and you tore your Achilles. Great. You got 6 visits to come back from that, and we're going to get you back to that really crappy position that you were in before. Congrats. You're back to your crappy baseline. Right? Like, it's kind of absurd. Like that's probably why you got injured, to get into that spot. So congrats. We're going to get you back to that. People, I think, just have to realize that there's a whole next level we need to get to, and that's where the kind of the blend, that bridging the gap of rehab and performance has to happen here. Like, PTs are really good at the acute, sometimes even subacute kind of phase, and strength coaches do a really good job with healthy people, but that middle ground where people are suboptimal but not injured, that is this ground, and it's probably more people than we give credit for. So, PTs tend to do a kind of like not the best job with like advanced performance-based stuff. And even like the strength coaches, personal trainers in the world, as well as they do a good job, they oftentimes just guess to try to optimize people, like just slap some correctives on some people and hope it works, right? Oh, you don't have shoulder mobility? Well, jam it up there 10 times. Let's see if that gets better. Like, why would that work, right? So it's like one of those weird positions. So it's this middle ground of, we kind of keep, I keep saying this phrase because I really like this phrase, but it's restoring, kind of going through the whole spectrum of it. It's restoring, optimizing, and then enhancing their performance. You got to do those together, right? Restoring's PT, and enhancing is the strength world. It's that optimizing in the middle that I just don't think we are really good at just yet. And that's kind of the whole point of why we tried to get this stuff out there to the public.
And have you got any kind of, is there any programs or courses that you're currently designing, or is there anything you're currently kind of, turning your particular attention to, whether that's in your practice or as an educator?
Yeah, I mean, so for myself, like what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just get better at, workload management and understanding some of those concepts, and, digging into like the Tim Gabbett world with, acute chronic workload ratios and a lot of their, research that goes into that, and how to apply that to all sorts of things. So not just, performance, but also some rehab things. So that's kind of where I've been trying to kind of, grow myself. But in terms of like creating more courses and stuff, to be honest with you, that the champion performance specialist courses, I mean, it's absolutely enormous. It's gigantic. So I've been, just trying to bring people through, the enrollment waves with that. So we have open enrollments a couple times a year, and I really try to get in there, and we do a bunch of like live sessions so that way we can help people like over the internet kind of get it. And I've just been focusing so much on that and refining that it's been pretty neat to kind of see, all the people, really go through it and actually get that light bulb moment, right? Yeah. Where they're like, all right, this makes sense. Like, it's like, you've just given me like what I say in the whole program is like, I'm going to give you the recipe, right? You may have your own ingredients. Like, I don't really care if you like salt or pepper. That's fine. Like, I don't care if you like instrument assisted or dry needling, cupping, or using I don't care what you do. But here's the recipe. You put your ingredients in, so it's like completely scalable to each person. It's pretty neat the way you do that.
Sounds well supported. It sounds like you're kind of, will get, regardless of the disciplines or the skill sets people want to use or bring to it, you're joining the dots essentially for how they package it for performance and health.
Yeah, absolutely. It's having that experience and seeing all those things, putting it all together. It's pretty neat again when, that light bulb goes off. So it's pretty cool, but like, I don't mean to keep talking about that. It's just more that's mostly what's on my head right now is how to teach people this middle ground here. It's just, it's so foreign to most people, but at least in my world, that's what everybody wants to do, right? Everybody like in the sports world wants to work with athletes and pro sports and stuff like that. But they're probably the least equipped to do that of all the different demographics.
Yeah. No, it's pressing, isn't it? It's a sign of the times.
Right. Absolutely. It's going to be fun. We're not far off. It's not rocket science. I just think it's not built into our educational models to really, focus on that yet. So, there's some extra learning to do.
Well, I think we're on the clock, but where's the best place for people to find you? I know you've got that, that's quite an endless list for you because you're everywhere online, but where's the best place for people to follow you?
I'm easy. My hub's just my website, MikeReinold.com. And, from there you can follow me on social, or, I get a weekly newsletter, I get a podcast. I mean, there's just so much out there. Just, myself, my team, like all of us at Champion, we just love educating because it keeps us on the current edge, like the cutting edge, and staying up on things. So, we just love doing it. And it's just what we've done like for our whole career. So it's for people that want to join us in that journey, and for the people that are sick of going on Instagram and trying to figure out what on earth to do because everyone's just arguing and saying nothing works. It's very frustrating right now. So that could be a whole nother episode.
You've definitely got a good menu of people to pick from as to how they consume your content and your framework for education and progressing themselves.
Yeah, awesome. And it's, again, like I said, it's proud to be part of this podcast too, because you guys are also doing your part on educating everybody. So thank you for that, and thank you for spreading the knowledge.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on and giving up some time amongst the crazy time of year that is spring training.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Hopefully we'll do it again. Thanks a lot.
I'd like to thank Mike Reinold for coming on today's show. It's a real pleasure to chat to him both on and off air, and I really appreciate his down-to-earth yet expert insight, and especially midway through spring training for baseball, which was very generous. So again, big thank you to him. Definitely check out his website, MikeReinold.com. It is truly full of great information for both coaches and clinicians. And as usual, everything will be linked in the show notes, which you can find at our website, informperformance.com. Thank you for listening to this Informed Performance episode with me, Andy McDonald, and we will catch you next week for another performance and sports medicine conversation.